You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to the CorbinPasta Collection, Volume 1. This is a set of original creepypastas that I made for Corbin's channel. Now, calling them CorbinPastas is kind of funny because, again, Corbin didn't have a ton of input on basically any of these creepypastas when it came to actually creating them. However, they are on his channel. They're actually ones that I made predominantly using ChatGPT, although I did do some tweaks to some of them myself, and then narrated typically with AI voices. It's not the case for everything in this video. In fact, there is one classic, amazing creepypasta in this that Corbin and I did a reading of together, as well as some trollpastas that was neither written by me, Corbin, or ChatGPT. Two of which weren't even on Corbin's channel, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction for each story in this video, and then you can have some context for them. So the first story we have is The Haunting of Chef's Love Shack. Now, this one is the first creepypasta I had the AI write, and it's kind of clear that it doesn't understand everything about how Chef's Love Shack works. It's still decent, but I do think it is one of the lesser ones that the AI came up with. There's no tweaks in it from me, story-wise, but nevertheless, it is still pretty decent, and there are no other creepypastas of Chef's Love Shack to my knowledge, so I felt like there needed to be one, hence why I made it.
The Haunting of Chef's Love Shack. It was a rainy evening when Matt stumbled upon the old, dusty PlayStation game in the corner of a second-hand store. The box was unremarkable, a faded image of the South Park characters with the title Chef's Love Shack emblazoned across the top. He chuckled, remembering the days when he and his friends would gather to play the game during sleepovers. On a whim, he bought it, feeling nostalgic and eager to relive some old memories. That night, Matt popped the disc into his PlayStation 1 and turned on his TV. The screen flickered to life, and the familiar menu appeared. However, something seemed slightly off. The colors were duller than he remembered, and there was an unsettling static noise accompanying the background music. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the age of the game. As he started a new game, the characters' voices sounded distorted, their laughter twisted into something almost demonic. Matt brushed it off as a quirk of the old hardware and continued playing. The game itself was just as he remembered, silly minigames and crude humor. But as he progressed, odd glitches began to appear, characters freezing mid-motion, unsettling whispers replacing the usual sound effects. The most disturbing anomaly occurred when Matt reached the Chef's Love Shack party game. Instead of the usual cheerful banter, the screen darkened and the game began to display eerie, unsettling images. The characters' eyes seemed hollow and lifeless, their smiles grotesque. The laughter had turned into a chilling, high-pitched wail that echoed unnervingly through the speakers. Matt tried to turn off the game, but the console refused to respond. The screen continued to flicker with strange symbols and disturbing faces that seemed to be pleading for help. His heart raced as the room grew colder, and the static on the TV screen began to resemble the shadowy figure of Chef, his eyes glowing a haunting red. Suddenly, the game crashed, and the screen went black. Matt sighed in relief, but when he tried to eject the disc, it was stuck. Panic surged through him. The TV flickered back on, and the game resumed, but this time, the title screen had changed. Instead of the cheerful Chef's Love Shack logo, it now read Chef's Love Shack, the final party. The game had taken on a life of its own. The characters on screen now seemed aware of Matt's presence, their eyes tracking his every move. The minigames became increasingly macabre, sudden jump scares, horrific visions of bloodied chefs, and disturbing images that seemed to draw closer with each passing moment. Desperate, Matt yanked the power cord from the wall, but the chilling wail persisted. The game had transcended the boundaries of the console and seemed to be echoing through his home. The voices grew louder, their whispers turning into a chorus of anguished screams. Days later, when Matt's friends came over, they found him in a state of shock. The game disc was nowhere to be found, and Matt refused to speak of what had happened. The TV was now permanently stuck on a static screen, and the PlayStation remained unresponsive. No matter how hard they tried, they could never get the console to work again. Matt moved out of the apartment shortly after, leaving behind the cursed PlayStation and the unsettling memories of that night. The disc was never found, and the second-hand store where Matt had bought it had mysteriously shut down soon after. Some say that the game is still out there, lurking in the darkest corners of second-hand stores and flea markets, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim. If you happen to come across an old copy of Chef's Love Shack, remember this: some games are better left unplayed, and some curses are better left unspoken.
Next up we have LSD Dream Emulator, the Unpatched Dream. Now there is a famous LSD Dream Emulator creepypasta, but I actually think this one's better than that. And it's about an unreleased beta version of LSD. So without further ado, let's just jump in and have a listen.
LSD Dream Emulator, the Unpatched Dream. There's something wrong with LSD Dream Emulator. Everyone who's played it knows that already. It's a game that feels more like a ritual. But what most don't know is that there was an unreleased version, a patch, something that never made it past a brief internal test build at Asmik Ace Entertainment in 1998. The only known disc was destroyed after an incident, or so they thought. I know because I found it. I'm not a collector. I don't prowl eBay for sealed copies or dig through old Japanese forums. This copy came to me secondhand through a friend. He knew I liked weird games, so when he saw a scratched-up PS1 disc at a flea market in Osaka with LSDV 1.4, Wei Shu Zhengban, unpatched there, scrawled in marker, he grabbed it for a laugh. I laughed too, until I booted it up. At first, it looked like the regular game, janky graphics, dream logic, odd textures. But things were sharper. The music was wrong. Not just weirder, wrong. Every sound felt intentional, like each note was placed specifically to irritate your subconscious. Then came the first difference. After the initial dream, instead of waking to the familiar dream journal interface, I was shown a grainy video. Real footage. A man in a white room, standing perfectly still. There was no audio, no movement, just the slow zoom of the camera closing in on him. When it reached his face, the screen flashed white and dumped me back into the game. The next dream wasn't procedural. It was identical to the last. Same corridors, same textures, same placement of objects. Only this time I could hear breathing. My characters? I don't think so. It came from the walls. Worse, there was something watching from the far end of the corridor. A figure in low poly shadow, featureless but human-shaped. I touched it. The game crashed. No error screen, just silence. My PlayStation made a faint buzzing noise, like it was struggling to eject the dream from memory. When I rebooted, the system skipped the BIOS entirely and went straight to black. Then one line of white text appeared in perfect English. He dreams of you now. The dreams became consistent. A new structure. Explore. See the man. Crash. Then the crash stopped. The game would hang on the man's face. Slowly, too slowly, his features began to change. They became more detailed with each dream. His eyes first, then his mouth. He was smiling by the 5th time. On the 6th night, I didn't start the game. It started itself. At 2:13 a.m., the PlayStation turned on with a mechanical whine. My CRT came alive, blaring static before snapping into the game. I didn't touch the controller. The dream moved on its own. The character wandered through a near-photorealistic hallway that looked disturbingly like my own apartment building. Same stains, same fire extinguisher in the corner. I unplugged the console. It kept running. The man, now fully rendered, stood outside an apartment door. My door. He lifted a finger and pointed at the screen. My doorbell rang. I didn't answer. I couldn't move. I watched the screen until it faded to black. When I woke up the next morning, the disc was gone from the console. No scratches on the floor. No sign anyone had been inside. Just a post-it note on my television. Final dream complete. Thank you. I've tried to track down that version to prove to myself it was real. But even the most obsessive LSD community archivists deny any such version existed. Version 1.3 is the final build, officially. No mention of V1.4 or anything labeled Wei Shu Zhengban in any changelog or data mine. But every so often, someone posts a screenshot, a slightly different hallway, a character model that looks too familiar. They ask, anyone know why this happens? The replies are always the same, just dream logic. But one time, just once, someone answered, if he finds you, don't answer the door.
Next up we have Duke Nukem Time to Kill Hidden Frequency. Once again, I don't know if there's any other Duke Nukem Time to Kill creepypastas out there. And at the time I made this one, we had just watched They Live, so I knew I had to put something with They Live in it. So I was actually pretty specific with this prompt. Those first two I was actually pretty vague. Like the first one I said, just write one about Chef's Love Shack, and then the other one I said, write one about LSD Dream Emulator. But this one I was very specific to make sure it had the They Live references in there, it had nods to the catchphrase, it had the sunglasses. This one, I had kind of an outline that I gave it, and I think it turned out really well.
Duke Nukem Hidden Frequency. I was always into weird retro stuff. VHS horror, PS1 games, 90s shooters. There was something comforting about how rough and clunky everything was. Like the world hadn't figured itself out yet. That's probably why I ended up collecting old demo discs and forgotten builds. Most of it was junk or buggy pre-release versions, but last month, I found something else. I was at a local flea market when I saw it. Nestled between some scratched-up CDs and faded Goosebumps books was a black PlayStation case. No label. The words, Duke Nukem, Time to Kill, internal review copy, written in silver marker. $5. I didn't hesitate. I loved Time to Kill as a kid. Duke in a leather jacket, time-hopping to kill alien scum. It was a trashy, testosterone-fueled power fantasy with no apologies. So I brought it home, booted up my modded PS2, and popped the disc in. It started normally. Menu screen, grungy industrial music, Duke's gruff one-liners. I selected New Game, but something was off. The first level wasn't the Old West like it should have been. It was a grimy alley at night. Trash fluttered in the wind. CRT monitors glowed through storefront windows. A neon sign buzzed "Obey" in big blocky letters. The visuals weren't just low-res. They looked deliberately distorted, like the world was fighting to stay rendered. Occasionally text would flicker across the screen too fast to read. I thought maybe it was an ARG or some unfinished cut. I walked Duke through the alley. No enemies, just ambient static, like a broken signal. Eventually I found a pair of black sunglasses lying on the ground. I remembered They Live instantly. I even laughed. Nice reference. Duke picked them up and growled, "Time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum." The voice acting was different, slower, hollow, less smug, like he was waking up. I equipped the glasses and the screen glitched hard. Horizontal lines, inverted colors, a loud buzzing. Then everything changed. The alley was the same, but not. The buildings now pulsed with fleshy, organic texture. The signs didn't say, "Obey" anymore. They said, "Sleep, submit, feed us." The people walking by were no longer people. Their skin was translucent, their eyes empty sockets, alien, reptilian, like the ones from They Live. And Duke? He didn't say anything for a while, just stood there. Then he muttered, "What the hell is this?" That wasn't from the original game. That line wasn't anywhere in Time to Kill. I kept going. Every level after that was a twisted, altered version of the original stages. The strip club level. The dancers were skinless, their movements jerky like broken puppets. The Roman Colosseum, full of civilians cheering, but with the glasses on, they were cheering for executions. At one point, you walk past a mirror, and Duke doesn't reflect, just a shadowy figure watching you from behind your own POV. There was no HUD anymore, no health bar, no ammo count, just static. At the end of one level, you find a TV studio. Cameras point at a podium. You hear voices behind the walls, alien voices, cold and commanding. They're talking about frequencies, sleep cycles, compliance. They mention Earth as a project, and their cycle is almost up. One of the screens in the studio flashes code for a split second. I paused and rewound it on my capture card. It was binary. I decoded it. The glasses work because your reality is a signal. The last level is set in a modern city, but everything's melting. Buildings collapse. The sky glitches in red and black. With the glasses on, you see the word truth pulsing above a radio tower. Duke fights his way to the top, killing those alien bastards left and right. As you reach the final control room, the screen goes black. A message appears. "You've seen too much. This copy will now erase itself." And it did. My PS2 shut off. The disc wouldn't boot again. Later, I dug into the game files I'd backed up. Nothing matched the known Time to Kill data. Some of the audio files were in reverse. One of them, when reversed back, was a distorted version of Duke's bubblegum line, but it ended with, "They live, we sleep."
Sometimes I see that phrase in random places now, reflected in windows, in TV static. Once in a dream, Duke was staring at me through the sunglasses. "Put 'em on," he said, "or stay blind like the rest." Haven't put them on, not yet, but I keep thinking about that line, "Time to Kill."
Maybe it wasn't about aliens. Maybe it was about us.
Alright, here we have 1 vs. 100, the final episode. Yet again, another obscure game that definitely doesn't have any creepypastas out there that I know of. So I felt that I needed to have it make one. So, here it is, 1 vs. 100, the final episode.
1 vs. 100, the final episode. Back in the late 2000s, 1 vs. 100 on Xbox Live was something special. It wasn't just a trivia game. It was a live event. Every week, thousands of players logged in, vying for Microsoft points and avatar swag, with a real host narrating the action. But there's something most people don't talk about. Something buried under nostalgic memories and faded Xbox forums. There was an unlisted version of 1 vs 100. Not a glitch, not a beta. Something else. People called it the final episode, and no one really knows who hosted it. It started with a rumor on a gaming forum back in 2011, just after Microsoft shut the game down. A user named KennyPrime77 posted a blurry screenshot showing the familiar 1 vs 100 lobby, except it looked off. The colors were muted. The avatars all stood completely still. And instead of live game or extended play, the event was labeled 1 vs 100, the final episode, live, 3:33 a.m. EST. Everyone assumed it was fake, but a few others started chiming in. Got the same invite at 3:33 a.m. Thought it was a joke. My Xbox froze when I tried to join. I accepted the invite. My controller kept vibrating until the batteries died. After that, the dashboard wouldn't load. My friend joined it. He hasn't been online since. That last comment always stuck with me, because I knew someone like that. My friend Jared and I were obsessed with the game. We'd play every episode, trash talk on voice chat, and compete to see who could get the most right answers. He was good, better than me. But after the game shut down, he went dark. He told me he'd found a modded version of 1 vs 100 running off a private server. Said he got in through some strange Xbox Live Arcade demo he downloaded by mistake. He was acting weird about it, paranoid even. He said the host wasn't Chris Cashman. It was someone else. Someone with no face, just a dark silhouette. He said the host spoke directly to him. Not like a narrator, like a voice in his head. That was the last time I heard from Jared. Still had the Blades dashboard, somehow preserved through a failed update. I was just feeling nostalgic, booting up old XBLA games, digging through the past. That's when it happened. A message popped up. You've been selected for 1 vs 100, the final episode. No sender, no option to decline. I tried backing out, but my third-party Mad Catz controller started glitching, button sticking, the guide button blinking red. Then the screen went black. Suddenly, I was in the game. The avatars were motionless, dead-eyed. I was the one. The mob? 100 players. Gamer tags I hadn't seen in years, including Jared's. I couldn't move, couldn't quit. The host's voice came on, not through the speakers, but like a radio signal in my brain. Welcome back. You know the rules. 1 vs 100. Answer correctly, and they fall. Answer wrong, and you disappear. I played. The first question was easy. What's the capital of France? I answered Paris. 12 avatars vanished in a blink. No animation, just gone. Second question. What comes after 3? I typed 4 point. The voice paused. Correct. Enough. More vanished. Then the questions got strange. Do you remember what Jared's last words were? I froze. That wasn't trivia. He screamed your name. My avatar twitched. Next question. What's under your bed? I panicked. I typed nothing. Wrong answer. The screen glitched. The mob turned to look at me. All of them. Eyes glowing. Unblinking. Jared was in the front row. He smiled. The voice whispered, "You're part of the show now." My Xbox shut off. Since then, my gamertag shows as online, playing 1 vs 100. Even when the console's unplugged. People say if you go online at 3:33 a.m. with a modded Xbox 360, sometimes you'll get an invite to the final episode. If you do, don't play. Or you might become part of the mob. Just another ghost in the leaderboard, waiting for the next one.
Alright, this next one is a famous creepypasta. This is not one that Corbin or I or AI had anything to do with making. However, Corbin and I did the narration, and I edited the video and put the music in, etc. This is No End House by Brian Russell, my favorite creepypasta of all time, and if I'm not mistaken, Corbin's favorite creepypasta of all time as well. No End House is super well known. We both love it. Corbin was doing a reading of it. He only did about half of it, and he was going to do a second half, because I edit Corbin's videos, so he was going to send me the other half later, and eventually I'm just like, hey, what if I recorded the second half? And so that's what happened. I love No End House, so let's just jump in.
Let me start by saying that Peter Terry was addicted to heroin. We were friends in college and continued to be after I graduated. Notice that I said I. He dropped out after 2 years of barely cutting it. After I moved out of the dorms and into a small apartment, I didn't see Peter as much. We would talk online every now and then. There was a period where he wasn't online for about 5 weeks straight. I wasn't worried. He was pretty notorious flake and drug addict, so I assumed he just stopped caring. Then, one night, I saw him log on. Before I could initiate a conversation, he sent me a message. "David, man, we need to talk." That was when he told me about the No End House. It got that name because no one had ever reached the final exit. The rules were pretty simple and cliché. Reach the final room of the building and you win $500. There were 9 rooms in all. The house was located outside the city, roughly 4 miles from my house. Apparently, Peter had tried and failed. He was a heroin and who knows what the fuck addict. So I figured the drugs got the best of him and he wigged out at a paper ghost or something. He told me it would be too much for anyone, that it was unnatural. I didn't believe him. I told him I would check it out the next night, and no matter how hard he tried to convince me otherwise, $500 sounded too good to be true. I had to go. I set out the following night. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange about the building. Have you ever seen or read something that shouldn't be scary, but for some reason, a chill crawls up your spine? I walked toward the building, and the feeling of uneasiness only intensified as I opened the front door. My heart slowed, and I let a relieved sigh leave me as I entered. The room looked like a normal hotel lobby decorated for Halloween. A sign was posted in place of a worker. It read, "Room 1, this way. 8 more follow. Reach the end, and you win." I chuckled and made my way to the first door. The first area was almost laughable. The decor resembled the Halloween aisle of a Kmart, complete with chic ghosts and animatronic zombies that gave a static growl when you passed by. At the far end was an exit. It was the only door besides the one I entered through. I brushed through the fake spider webs and headed for the second room. I was greeted by fog as I opened the door to room 2. The room definitely upped the ante in terms of technology. Not only was there a fog machine, but a bat hung from the ceiling and flew in a circle. Scary. They seemed to have a Halloween soundtrack that one would find in a 99-cent store on loop somewhere in the room. I didn't see a stereo, but I guess they must have used a PA system. I stepped over a few toy rats that wheeled around and walked with a puffed chest across to the next area. I reached for the doorknob and my heart sank to my knees. I did not want to open that door. A feeling of dread hit me so hard I could barely even think. Logic overtook me after a few terrified moments, and I shook it off and entered the next room. Room 3 is when things began to change. On the surface, it looked like a normal room. There was a chair in the middle of the wood-paneled floor, A single lamp in the corner did a poor job of lighting the area, casting a few shadows across the floor and walls. That was the problem. Shadows, plural. With the exception of the chairs, there were others. I had barely walked in the door, and I was already terrified. It was at that moment that I knew something wasn't right. I didn't even think as I automatically tried to open the door I came through. It was locked from the other side. That set me off. Was someone locking the doors as I progressed? There was no way I would have heard them. Was it a mechanical lock that set automatically? Maybe, but I was too scared to really think. I turned back to the room, and the shadows were gone. The chair's shadow remained, but the others were gone. I slowly began to walk. I used to hallucinate when I was a kid, so I wrote off the shadows as a figment of my imagination. I began to feel better as I made it to the halfway point of the room. I looked down as I took my steps, and that's when I saw it. Or didn't see it. My shadow wasn't there. I didn't have time to scream. I ran as fast as I could to the other door and flung myself without thinking into the room beyond. The fourth room was possibly the most disturbing. As I closed the door, all light seemed to be sucked out and put back into the previous room. I stood there, surrounded by darkness, not able to move. I'm not afraid of the dark and never have been, but I was absolutely terrified. All sight had left me. I held my hand in front of my face, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I would never have been able to tell. Darkness doesn't describe it. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silence. When you're in a soundproof room, you can still hear yourself breathing. You can hear yourself being alive. I couldn't. I began to stumble forward after a few moments, my rapidly beating heart the only thing I could feel. There was no door in sight. I wasn't even sure there was one this time. The silence was then broken by a low hum. I felt something behind me. I spun around wildly, but could barely even see my nose. I knew it was there. Regardless of how dark it was, I knew something was there. The hum grew louder, closer. It seemed to surround me, but I knew whatever was causing the noise in front of me, inching closer. I took a step back. I had never felt that kind of fear. I can't really describe true fear. I wasn't even scared I was going to die. I was scared of what the alternative was. I was afraid of what this thing had in store for me. Then the lights flashed for a second and I saw it. Nothing. I saw nothing, and I know I saw nothing there. The room was again plunged into darkness, and the hum became a wild screech. I screamed in protest. I couldn't hear this goddamn sound for another minute. I ran backwards away from the noise and fumbled for the door handle. I turned and fell into room 5. Before I describe room 5, you have to understand something. I am not a drug addict. I have had no history of drug abuse or any sort of psychosis short of the childhood hallucinations I mentioned earlier. And those were only when I was really tired or just waking up. I entered the no-end house with a clear head. After falling in from the previous room, my view of room 5 was from my back, looking up at the ceiling. What I saw didn't scare me, it simply surprised me. Trees had grown into the room and towered above my head. The ceilings in this room were taller than the others, which made me think I was in the center of the house. I got off the floor, dusted myself off, and took a look around. It was definitely the biggest room of them all. I couldn't even see the door from where I was. Various brush and trees must have blocked my line of sight with the exit. Up to this point, I figured the rooms were going to get scarier, but this was a paradise compared to the last room. I also assumed whatever was in room 4 stayed back there. I was incredibly wrong. As I made my way deeper into the room, I began to hear what one would hear if they were in a forest. Chirping bugs and the occasional flap of birds seemed to be my only company. That was the thing that bothered me the most. I heard the bugs and other animals, but I didn't see any of them. I began to wonder how big this house was. From the outside, when I first walked up to it, it looked like a regular house. It was definitely on the bigger side, but there was almost an entire forest in here. The canopy covered my view of the ceiling, but I assumed it was still there, however high it was. I couldn't see any walls either. The only way I knew I was still inside was the floor matched the other rooms, with standard dark wood paneling. I kept walking, hoping that the next tree I passed would reveal the door. After a few moments of walking, I felt a mosquito fly onto my arm. I shook it off and kept going. A second later, I felt about 10 more land all over my skin. I felt them crawl up and down my arms and legs, and a few made their way across my face. I flailed wildly to get them all off, but they just kept crawling. I looked down and let out a muffled scream, more of a whimper, to be honest. I didn't see a single bug. Not one bug was on me, but I could feel them crawl. I heard them fly by my face and sting my skin, but I couldn't see a single one. I dropped to the ground and began to roll wildly. I was desperate. I hated bugs, especially ones I couldn't see or touch. But these bugs could touch me, and they were everywhere. I began to crawl. I had no idea where I was going. The entrance was nowhere in sight, and I still hadn't even seen the exit, so I just crawled, my skin wriggling with the presence of those phantom bugs. After what seemed like hours, I found the door. I grabbed the nearest tree and propped myself up, mindlessly slapping my arms and legs to no avail. I tried to run, but I couldn't. My body was exhausted from crawling and dealing with whatever it was that was on me. I took a few shaky steps to the door, grabbing each tree on the way for support. It was only a few feet away when I heard it, the low hum from before. It was coming from the next room, and it was deeper. I could almost feel it inside my body, like when you stand next to an amp at a concert. The feeling of the bugs on me lessened as the hum grew louder. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, the bugs were completely gone, but I couldn't bring myself to turn the knob. I knew that if I let go, the bugs would return, and there was no way I would make it back to room 4. I just stood there, my head pressed against the door marked 6, and my hand shakily grasping the knob. The hum was so loud I couldn't even hear myself pretend to think. There was nothing I could do but move on. Room 6 was next, and room 6 was hell. I closed the door behind me, my eyes held shut and my ears ringing. The hum was surrounding me. As the door clicked into place, the hum was gone. I opened my eyes in surprise and the door I had shut was gone. It was just a wall now. I looked around in shock. The room was identical to room 3, the same chair and lamp, but with the correct amount of shadows this time. The only real difference was that there was no exit door, and the one I came in through was gone. As I said before, I had no previous issues in terms of mental instability, but at that moment, I fell into what I know now was insanity. I didn't scream, I didn't make a sound. At first, I scratched softly. The wall was tough, but I knew the door was there somewhere. I just knew it was. I scratched at where the doorknob was. I clawed at the wall frantically with both hands, my nails being filed down to the skin against the wood. I fell silently to my knees. The only sound in the room was incessant scratching against the wall. I knew it was there. The door was there. I knew it was just there. I knew if I could just get past this wall. Are you all right? I jumped off the ground and spun in one motion. I leaned against the wall behind me, and I saw what it was that spoke to me. To this day, I regret ever turning around. There was a little girl. She was wearing a soft, white dress that went down to her ankles. She had long blonde hair to the middle of her back and white skin and blue eyes. She was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, and I know that nothing in my life will ever be as unnerving as what I saw in her. While looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body, only larger than normal and covered in hair. He was naked from head to toe, but his head was not human, and his toes were hoofs. It wasn't the devil, but at that moment, it might as well have been. The form had the head of a ram and the snout of a wolf. It was horrifying, and it was synonymous with the little girl in front of me. They were the same form. I can't really describe it, but I saw them at the same time. They shared the same spot in that room, but it was like looking at two separate dimensions. When I saw the girl, I saw the form, and when I saw the form, I saw the girl. I couldn't speak. I could barely even see. My mind was revolting against what it was attempting to process. I had been scared before in my life, and I had never been more scared than when I was trapped in the 4th room, but that was before room 6. I just stood there, staring at whatever it was that spoke to me. There was no exit. I was trapped here with it, and then it spoke again. David, you should have listened. When it spoke, I heard the words of the little girl, but the other form spoke through my mind in a voice I won't attempt to describe. There was no other sound. The voice just kept repeating that sentence over and over in my mind, and I agreed. I didn't know what to do. I was slipping into madness, but couldn't take my eyes off what was in front of me. I dropped to the floor. I thought I had passed out, but the room wouldn't let me. I just wanted it to end. I was on my side, my eyes wide open, and the form staring down at me. Scurrying across the floor in front of me was one of the battery-powered rats from the 2nd room. The house was toying with me. For some reason, seeing that rat pulled my mind back from whatever depths it was headed. I looked around the room. I was getting out of there. I was determined to escape the house, and and live and never think about this place again. I knew this room was hell, and I wasn't ready to take up a residency. At first, it was just my eyes that moved. I searched the walls for any kind of opening. The room wasn't that big, so it didn't take long to soak up the entire layout. The demon still taunted me, the voice growing louder as the form stayed rooted where it stood. I placed my hand on the floor, lifted myself up to all four, and turned to scan the wall behind me. Then I saw something I couldn't believe. The form was now right at my back, whispering into my mind about how I shouldn't have come. I felt its breath on the back of my neck, but I refused to turn around. A large rectangle was scratched into the wood, with a small dent chipped away in the center of it. Right in front of my eyes, I saw the large 7 I had mindlessly etched into the wall. I knew what it was. Room 7 was just beyond that wall, where Room 5 was moments ago. I don't know how I had done it. Maybe it was just my state of mind at the time, but I had created the door. I knew I had. In my madness, I had scratched into the wall what I needed the most, an exit to the next room. Room 7 was close. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some reason, it couldn't touch me. I closed my eyes and placed both hands on the large 7 in front of me. I pushed as hard as I could. The demon was now screaming in my ear. It told me I was never leaving. It told me that this was the end, but I wasn't going to die. I was going to live there in room 6 with it. I wasn't. I pushed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew I was going to push through the wall eventually. I clenched my eyes shut and screamed, and the demon was gone. I was left in silence. I turned around slowly and was greeted by the room as it was when I entered. Just a chair and a lamp. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't have time to waste. I turned back to the 7 and jumped back slightly. What I saw was a door. It wasn't the one I had scratched in, but a regular door with a large 7 on it. My whole body was shaking. It took me a while to turn the knob. I just stood there for a while, staring at the door. I couldn't stay in room 6. I couldn't. But this was only room 6. I couldn't imagine what 7 had in store. I must have stood there for an hour just staring at the 7. Finally, with a deep breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door to room 7. I stumbled through the door, mentally exhausted and physically weak. The door behind me closed, and I realized where I was. I was outside. No outside like room 5, but actually outside.
My eyes stung. I wanted to cry. I fell to my knees and tried, but I couldn't. I was finally out of that hell. I didn't even care about the prize that was promised. I turned and saw that the door I had just went through was the entrance. I walked to my car and drove home, thinking of how nice a shower sounded. As I pulled up to my house, I felt uneasy. The joy of leaving No End House had faded, and dread was slowly building in my stomach. I shook it off as residual from the house and made my way to the front door. I entered and immediately went up to my room. There on the bed was my cat, Baskerville. He was the first living thing I'd seen all night, and I reached out to pet him. He hissed and swiped at my hand. I recoiled in shock, as he'd never acted like that. I thought, whatever, he's an old cat. I jumped in the shower and got ready for what I was expecting to be a sleepless night. After my shower, I went to the kitchen to make something to eat. I descended the stairs and turned into the family room. What I saw would be forever burned into my mind, however. My parents were lying on the ground, naked and covered in blood. They'd been mutilated to near unidentifiable states. Their limbs had been removed and placed next to their bodies, and their heads sat on their chests, facing me. The most unsettling part was their expressions. They were smiling, as though they were happy to see me. I vomited and sobbed, right there in the family room. I didn't know what had happened. They didn't even live with me at the time. I was a mess. Then I saw it. A door that was never there before. A door with a large 8 scrawled on it in blood. I was still in the house. I was standing in the family room, but I was in room 7. The faces of my parents smiled wider as I realized this. They weren't my parents. They couldn't be, but they looked exactly like them. The door marked 8 was across the room, behind the mutilated bodies in front of me. I knew I had to move on, but at the moment, I gave up. The smiling faces tore into my mind. They grounded me where I stood. I vomited again and nearly collapsed. Then the hum returned. It was louder than ever, and it filled the house and shook the walls. The hum compelled me forward. I began to move slowly, making my way closer to the door and the bodies. I could barely stand, let alone walk. And the closer I got to my parents, the closer I came to suicide. The walls were now shaking so hard it seemed as though they were going to crumble, but still the faces smiled at me. As I inched closer, their eyes followed me. I was now between the 2 bodies, a few feet away from the door. The dismembered hands clawed their way across the carpet towards me. All the while, the faces continued to stare. New terror washed over me, and I walked faster. I didn't want to hear them speak. I didn't want the voices to match those of my parents. They began to open their mouths, and the hands were inches from my feet. In a dash of desperation, I lunged toward the door, threw it open, and slammed it behind me. Roommate. I was done. After what I'd just experienced, I knew there wasn't anything else this fucking house could throw at me that I couldn't live through. There was nothing short of the fires of hell that I wasn't ready for. Unfortunately, I underestimated the abilities of the no-end house. Unfortunately, things got more disturbing, more terrifying, and even more unspeakable in Roommate. I still have trouble believing what I saw in Roommate. Again, the room was a carbon copy of rooms 3 and 6. But sitting in the usual empty chair was a man. After a few seconds of disbelief, my mind finally accepted the fact that the man sitting in the chair was me. Not someone who looked at me. It was me. It was David Williams. I walked closer. I got a better look, even though I was sure of it. He looked up at me and I noticed tears in his eyes. "Please don't do it. Please don't hurt me." "What?" I asked. "Who are you? I'm not going to hurt you." "Yes, you are." He was sobbing now. "You're going to hurt me and I don't want you to." He sat in the chair with his legs up and began rocking back and forth. It was actually pretty pathetic looking, especially since he was me, identical in every way. "Listen, who are you?" I was only a few feet from my doppelganger. It was the weirdest experience yet. Standing there talking to myself, I wasn't scared, but I would be soon. "Why are you... You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. If you want to leave, you're going to hurt me." "Why are you saying this? Just calm down, alright? Let's try and figure this..." And then I saw it. The David sitting down was wearing the same clothes as me, except for a small red patch on his shirt embroidered with the number 9. "You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. Please don't. You're going to hurt me." My eyes didn't leave that small number on his chest. I knew exactly what it was. The first few doors were plain and simple, but after a while, they got a little more ambiguous. 7 was scratched into the wall by my own hands. 8 was marked in blood above the bodies of my parents, but 9? This number was on a person, a living person. Worse still, it was a person that looked exactly like me. David? I had to ask. Yes, you're going to hurt me, you're going to hurt me. He continued to sob and rock. He answered to David. He was me, right down to the voice. But that 9. I paced around for a few minutes while he sobbed in his chair. The room had no door and, similarly to room 6, the door I came through was gone. For some reason, I assumed that the scratching would get me nowhere this time. I studied the walls and floor around the chair, sticking my head underneath and seeing if anything was below. Unfortunately, there was. Below the chair was a knife. Attached to it was a tag that read, "To David, from management." The feeling in my stomach as I read that tag was something sinister. I felt like throwing up. The last thing I wanted to do was remove the knife from under the chair. The other David was still sobbing uncontrollably. My mind was spinning into an attic of unanswerable questions. Who put this here, and how did they get my name? Not to mention the fact that as I knelt on the cold wood floor, I also sat in that chair, sobbing in protest of being hurt by myself. It was all too much to process. The house and management had been playing with me this whole time. My thoughts, for some reason, turned to Peter, and whether or not he got this far. If he did, if he met a Peter Terry sobbing in this very chair, rocking back and forth, I shook those thoughts out of my head. They didn't matter. I took the knife from under the chair and immediately, the other David went quiet. "David?" he said in my voice. "What do you think you're going to do?" I lifted myself from the ground and clenched the knife in my hand. "I'm going to get out of here." David was still sitting in the chair, though he was very calm now. He looked up at me with a slight grin. I couldn't tell if he was going to laugh or strangle me. Slowly he got up from the chair and stood, facing me. It was uncanny. His height and even the way he stood matched mine. I felt the rubber hilt of the knife in my hand and gripped tighter. I don't know what I was planning to do with it, but I had a feeling I was going to need it. "Now," his voice was slightly deeper than my own, "I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to keep you here." I didn't respond. I just lunged and tackled him to the ground. I mounted him and looked down. Knife poised and ready. He looked up at me, terrified. It was like I was looking in a mirror. The hum returned, low and distant, though I still felt it deep in my body. David looked up at me as I looked down at myself. The hum was growing louder and louder, and I felt something inside me snap. With one motion, I slammed the knife into the patch on his chest and ripped down. Blackness fell on the room, and I was falling. The darkness around me was like nothing I'd experienced up to that point. Room 4 was dark, but it didn't come close to what was completely engulfing me. I wasn't even sure if I was falling after a while. I felt weightless, covered in dark. Then a deep sadness came over me. I felt lost, depressed, and suicidal. The sight of my parents entered my mind. I knew it wasn't real, but I'd seen it. And the mind has trouble differentiating between what's real and what isn't. The sadness only deepened. I was in room 9 for what seemed like days. The final room, and that's exactly what it was, the end. No End House had an end, and I'd reached it. At that moment I gave up. I knew I'd be in that in-between state forever, accompanied by nothing but darkness. Not even the hum was there to keep me sane. I'd lost all senses. I couldn't feel myself. I couldn't hear anything. Sight was completely useless here. I searched for taste in my mouth and found nothing. I felt disembodied and completely lost. I knew where I was. This was hell. Room 9 was hell. Then it happened. A light. One of those stereotypical lights at the end of the tunnel. I felt the ground come up from below me, and I was standing. After a moment or two of gathering my thoughts and senses, I slowly walked toward the light. As I approached the light, it took form.
It was a vertical slit down the side of an unmarked door. I slowly walked through the door and found myself back where I started. The lobby of No End House. It was exactly how I left it. Still empty. Still decorated in childish Halloween decorations. After everything that happened last night, I was still wary of where I was. After a few moments of normalcy, I looked around the place, trying to find anything different. On the desk was a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on it. Immensely curious, yet still cautious, I mustered up the courage to open the envelope. Inside it was a letter. Again, handwritten. David Williams, congratulations! You've made it to the end of No End House. Please accept this prize as a token of great achievement. Yours forever, Management. With the letter were 5 $100 bills. I couldn't stop laughing. I laughed for what seemed like hours. I laughed as I walked out to my car and laughed as I drove home. I laughed as I pulled into my driveway. I laughed as I opened my front door to my house and I saw the small 10 etched into the wood.
Alright, next up we have another one that was not written by me or Corbin. This is called A Haunting Most Mario. This is a troll pasta that I only know about because it was briefly mentioned in an old Mudahar video like 10 years ago. I don't particularly like Mudahar, but I did used to watch him back in the day, so there is some nostalgia for his old creepypasta videos. Anyway, A Haunting Most Mario, it's a troll pasta. Let's just jump in.
I wanted to tell you all a story about something strange that happened to me once a while ago, one time. It is a scary story, but in the spirit of Halloween, I thought I would put it on my site 2 months early, the way grocery stores stock their candy. Once I wanted to play Mario, but I didn't have a Nintendo for it, and I was at a flea market. This old man I saw had Mario and a Nintendo, but the label was not there. Also, the man said it was owned by a dead kid named Jim. I said whatever cause, I was eager to play Mario on my new Nintendo. I plugged it in, but everything seemed normal. I played World 1-1 and did it. Then I tried the old warp pipe trick, and when I got to the pipes, instead of the usual text that said welcome to the warp zone, it said welcome to the scary hell place. I thought that was weird, but then I said whatever and used the farthest pipe. The intro screen showed the words Death World 666. The graphics seemed off, and it sounded like screams happened from the game. It was super scary, but I wasn't scared and kept playing. After a while, I hit a place that was impossible to pass because of spikes, so I had to die. I kept trying until my lives were at 0. I thought it would be game over, but Mario came back, and this time it looked like his face was bloody. As I started playing the level, it turned to a hidden cloud level, and it looked like Mario had angel wings. A spooky digital voice came out of the Nintendo that sounded like it said, "No hope." As I was about to grab a mushroom, the screen went black. I reset the Nintendo, and the game came up. This time the title screen was different, and Mario's face was bloody. It scared me so much, I reset it again. As it came on, the digital voice said, "You can't run from the funk." The screen was hyper-realistic, and it showed Mario again, only this time, his face was me and my family's face, and we were skeletons. It was so realistic, I couldn't believe it. I was compelled to try the game again. This time, I started it. As the first Goomba walked towards Mario, Mario turned towards the screen and started screaming, "No mass, no mass." It sounded like high-quality CD audio, also blast processing. I screamed and turned off the game. I put it away. Later that week, I noticed my family acting distantly. I decided to research Mario games, and I found out that Mario was in a secret game that was only released in 2 arcades on Friday the 13th on June 6th, 1997. It seemed weird, so I started playing video games again. I decided to put in the Mario game again. I loaded it up, and I saw my save file. I clicked it, and Mario said, "Why are you a Noah stopper playing a Maya gamer?" I didn't take his warning, and I played anyway. I got up to Bowser, and I won. But when I got to Peach, there was Toad there instead, and he said, "Peach is dead." Then a ghost face came up, and it had a lady's face, and Princess Peach is a lady. I reset the game for the last time. I opened up my save, and it changed from my name. It said, "Jim died, bro. Ah." Then my mum walked in, and she screamed. I was dead the whole time, and guess what? My name was Jim. So anyway, I don't know if any of you guys have experienced anything like that. It might have just been a bad dream. And anyway, my mum sold the cartridge at a yard sale, so I don't have it anymore, but you should believe, because true.
Alright, now this next one isn't actually like a creepypasta. It was more of a shitpost that I had the AI make for Corbin's channel. However, this one is the one that most heavily was edited by me, because the ending that the AI came up with was really lame, so I instead enhanced it by giving it a much darker and funnier ending. So here we have Homer Simpson versus the moon landing.
One sunny afternoon in Springfield, Homer Simpson was lounging on the couch flipping through channels when he stumbled upon a documentary about the moon landing. As he watched, he couldn't help but notice some inconsistencies in the footage. "Hey Marge, this looks weird. You ever notice how the flag's waving in a vacuum?" he asked. Marge, who was busy making dinner, replied, "Oh, Homer, I don't think you should worry about it." But Homer's curiosity was piqued. He spent the next few days diving into conspiracy theories online, convinced he'd uncovered a massive cover-up. His enthusiasm grew, and he began telling everyone in town about his newfound discovery. One day, while at Moe's Tavern, Homer blurted out his theory, not realizing that a couple of mysterious men in suits were seated nearby. The men, working for the CIA, overheard Homer and decided to investigate. They were tasked with containing any potential leaks of sensitive information. As Homer's claims spread, the CIA grew more concerned. They tracked him to the Simpsons' house, where they began monitoring his every move. Homer started noticing unusual activity around town. Black SUVs parked near his house, strangers asking questions about him, and even shadowy figures in the background of his favorite donut shop. Marge, skeptical but supportive, decided to help. She began devising clever disguises and decoys to throw the agents off Homer's trail. With Bart's help, they set up a series of traps around the house to confuse their pursuers. Lisa, using her alleged intellect, tried to gather evidence to prove that Homer's theory was flawed, hoping to convince him to drop it. Despite their efforts, the CIA agents grew increasingly determined. They finally cornered Homer in a dusty old library where he was trying to dig up old records. Using new state-of-the-art fed technology, they were able to administer a poison to Homer, left arm incapacitating him instantly. They dragged him to their secret Springfield headquarters located behind Herman's military antique store, for Herman was secretly a Fed. While there, Homer was mercilessly tortured, but his resolve continued, until finally they took him to room 101 where they administered a rat helmet. He persisted. The rats in the helmet slowly and methodically devouring his face, Homer Simpson was no more. Realizing the situation was resolved, the agents returned back to their glowing CIA nigger den in Langley. They quietly erased all trace of their investigation. And so life in Springfield returned to normal except for Homer, who was now dead and never found.
Alright, next up we have the classic trollpasta/meme, Who Was Phone? This is both versions of Who Was Phone, narrated by the AI, of course. This was not on Corbin's channel. This was actually on my second channel, because it was just a low-effort shitpost, just to have the AI read out this really stupid meme story. So let's just jump into Who Was Phone, both versions.
Okay, so basically it's like this. You're at a friend's house for like the night or whatever. And then you guys are making out on the couch? Yeah. And then, like, her dad calls on the phone and says, no, she likes it more if you use the other hand. Yeah. And you're all like, oh, dude, your dad is trying to give me advice on how to diddle you. And then she's like, I don't have a dad. Or whatever. But what? Who was phone? So you're with her, honey, and you're making out when the phone rings. You answer it and the VO she is, what are I doing with my daughter? You tell her, girl, and she say, my dad is dead. Then who was phone?
And finally, we have Death Trumpet. Yet another troll pasta, not on Corbin's channel, but on my second channel. And another one I heard about from an old Mudahar video. Death Trumpet is filled with all sorts of horrible spelling and shit. So really, part of the reason I've had this one narrated by the AI is I was curious how it would read all the garbage like leet speak and misspellings and horrible grammar. So let's just jump into it.
Yesterday, I bought a trumpet off of our boy for $45. When it arrived at my house, it was a gold trumpet, which was weird because trumpets are usually silver. When I tuck out to trumped, it comed with blood red valve oil and a corroded mouthpiece. I put the blood red valve oil into my trumpet and when I play it spurt blood all over my wall. I went to sleep and then I had a nightmare about a trumpet eating me alive. When I woke up, a trombone was sitting next to my death trumpet. I went to the bathroom to hide and take a big nasty shit. The trumpet and trombone followed me until they killed me. The trombone used its slide to fuck me into assholes and the trumpet suffocated me. I died in time because that's how I wrote this creepypasta.
And that is it for the CorbinPasta Collection Volume 1. There will, of course, be more, because I intend to continue making creepypastas for Corbin's channel. So I hope you guys enjoyed this compilation. I thought that, a lot of these creepypastas should be in my creepypasta playlist. No End House actually already is. But I figured this was a good way to just put it in the playlist all as one video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one. Toodles.